Europe and the US are locked in a tense standoff with Iran over its nuclear program. But will the inauguration of a new moderate Iranian president next week signal at least a thaw? The office of Britain's former Foreign Secretary Jack Straw confirms to us that Hassan Rouhani has invited him to attend his inauguration. And just listen to what Rouhani himself told the Iranian people right after his surprise victory last month.
Your government, that means the government of prudence and hope, as it is promised, will be acting in line with salvaging the country's economy, the revival of moralities, and constructive interaction with the world. The government will be adopting a moderate policy and will pursue the national goals accordingly.
Rouhani, a former chief nuclear negotiator, is a worldly man. He's said to be fluent in several languages, including English, which he presumably perfected while getting his doctorate at Glasgow Caledonian University. This video shows Rouhani graduating from the program in 1999. His key advisors have not been tapped yet, but many suspect that my next guest, Hossein Mousavian, could be one of them. Mousavian knows the president-elect well and worked for him when Rouhani headed Iran's nuclear negotiating team 10 years ago. And Mousavian made headlines when he famously said that no deal would be reached as long as the West demanded diamonds for peanuts. That is what he said to me about Iran's nuclear program. And for the past 8 years, he's been a visiting scholar at Princeton University, and he joins me from there right now. Welcome back to the program, Mr. Mousavian. And let me start by asking you, does the election of President-elect Rouhani signal a real change or just a change of face?
Definitely, the result of recent presidential election in Iran is a new opportunity for both resolving the Iranian nuclear crisis and trying for a better relation between Tehran and Washington.
How will that happen? Already, even this week, we've heard Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has said publicly that he doesn't trust Washington, he doesn't trust the United States. What will the president have to do to bring the supreme leader on board as he tries what he calls a new moderate engagement and interaction with the West?
I believe 3 measures would be extremely important. The first is what we need positive actions followed by positive words. Since 2009, President Obama has delivered really positive words like engagement, but at the same time, during his presidency, the US has imposed the most draconian sanctions and pressures unilaterally and multilaterally against Iran. But in contrary, in Tehran, President Ahmadinejad delivered very negative rhetorics, slogans, words, but in action he made the unprecedented overtures to reach Washington. The second issue, Christian, is whether they would be able to manage the domestic situation. Of course, we have a problem with domestic situation in Tehran and in Washington both. But in Tehran, there is a leader, a supreme leader, as ultimate decision maker. But whether we have the same situation in Washington or not, because President Obama has been trying for engagement. At the same time, since the early days in his office, he has been challenged by Congress, passing legislations, sanctions, pressures, calling for coercion and hostilities, animosities. And the third issue is related to...
Oh, go ahead.
Yes?
Go ahead.
And the third issue is related... Yeah, the third issue is related to interferences of the third country. I mean, Iran does not have problem with third country for a better relation with Washington. But the United States have problem with Israel because Israel is making pressure on on Washington, and some even regional Arab countries ally of the US. Therefore, controlling the foreign interferences on Tehran-Washington relations would be extremely important.
Let me ask you this, though. The President of the United States continues to say that there is time for diplomacy. Mr. Rouhani, has been calling and talking about healing. Let me play you this little bit of what he said at a press conference about the relationship with the United States.
The relation between Iran and the U.S. is a complicated and difficult issue. It's nothing easy. Well, you know, this has been a very old wound that is there, so we need to think of somehow healing this injury.
Mr. Mousavian, what can Mr. Rouhani as president do to heal? And do you think that there could be some kind of an interim arrangement, an interim deal, an interim solution to the nuclear issue between both sides?
I firmly believe there is a great chance, Christian, because I know very well what the P5+1 they want. They want a set of measures on transparency. The second, they want a set of measures on breakout capability. They want to assure that there would be no breakout in Iranian nuclear program. And Iranians also, in return, they are asking for two issues. One is recognition of the legitimate rights of Iran under Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, for enrichment like any other member. And second, lifting the sanctions. Now is the time to put these two major demands of the West and the P5+1 and two major demands of the Iranians in one package to be implemented step by step with proportionate reciprocations.
Well, we'll be very, very closely watching, and we will see whether there is actually the possibility of a breakthrough after the inauguration of President Rouhani. Mr. Mousavian, thank you very much indeed for joining me.